That'll tell you a little bit of how grad school may be under that person.
Right. And that doesn't mean that, you can make the decision on whether you want to move forward with applying, but that might be how it is, right? And generally grad students' emails are up online, and you can email those students and get some insider perspective on the program. I mean, if you're going to do a PhD, you're looking at between 7 and 10 years of your life. If you're doing an MA program, it's going to be at least 2, maybe 4. Right?
Unless you go to Europe, right?
Unless you go to Europe, right? So, I mean, it's a big commitment on everyone's part, people taking you and yours.
Why is the PhD program so much longer?
Well, you essentially have to get a master's on your way to your PhD. So you do a master's at those programs, so that's 2 to 3 years usually at a PhD program. Then you start your PhD work, which is a whole new project, right? And that also comes with additional coursework. So yeah, it's another, you do your MA essentially, and then you usually take qualifying exams, and you have to qualify to move on to your PhD, and there's a whole process.
Sometimes you spend a year writing grants to cover your research, like in cultural anthropology. It depends, like in archaeology, it depends on where you're working, but in both cases you're often having to write NSF or whatever kind of grant applications, and sometimes it's a year or sometimes longer of grant writing to get your project funded. So that's why the PhD, and then you got to do the field work. That's what kind of adds to the time of the PhD. So there's another huge thing here though, and it's the difference between a master's and a PhD. And that's something to think about. And there's various kind of schools of thought in this, but it's important to know, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but my understanding has been that if you're going to do a master's, you do a terminal master's program. Because, again, correct me if I'm wrong here, the reading of it is if you go to a PhD program and don't finish the PhD and you come out with a master's, the value of it, from what I understand, isn't quite as high as like SDSU master's program. It's the terminal degree in the department, right? And so that would be what you want to go for if you go for a master's. I mean,
yeah, if you go to UC Berkeley, right, and you're in the PhD program and you leave with a master's, the message is you weren't good enough to get your PhD, right? That you either dropped out or were asked to leave.
Yeah.
Right?
So
people are asked to leave occasionally.
So you would look into terminal MA programs. San Diego State has one. There's various schools that have terminal MAs. The UCs tend to be, they'll have some master's programs, but they tend to be mostly PhDs.
And you need to find mentors in your specific areas of study and ask them, tell them what you want to do with your life, and ask them what they think, and then ask someone else. Right? Don't ask just one person and do what they tell you. Ask multiple people. You need to use resources on campus as mentors, because someone might say, well, just go get your PhD, even though you aren't going to go teach at a university, and that might be good advice. But for others, it might be better advice just to go get an MA degree. There's a lot of things you have to weigh: cost, funding, time.
And what you want to do. I mean, if you want to go into the applied world, an MA, in my opinion, is a really strong degree, and you get a lot out of a 2 to 3 year program, and it depends on what you want to do. If you want to go into academia, you go to PhD.
Yeah.
If you want to go into the applied world, like in the case of Kaiser, it's a little bit mixed. Kaiser Permanente, they do hire on a lot of PhDs, but with a lot of applied work, a master's will carry you pretty far, and it's a strong degree, especially if you're getting a terminal degree, and also you're getting the most out of your program, which means that you're working well with your mentor and/or advisor. So the thing here is to do your homework with this kind of stuff, and you don't have to be. To me, like the way I used to do it, of going after like, hey, Berkeley looks awesome, it was actually more intimidating. I think to start looking in terms of people that you would be working with, and that to me opens up the possibilities of which programs you can look into. There's a lot out there. There's a lot of great programs that may not be in that top 5 of the whatever U.S. News Report or whatever. There's a lot of great programs. There's a lot out there, all across the country. So like one, for example, and there's specific reasons why, that I tell a lot of students to look into would be a program like Washington University. And the reason for it is because if you're going into the PhD, they have 5 years of guaranteed funding. And it's an awesome model, and I know some of the grad students there, and they're not freaking out over funding. And so this is another one, just to add one in there, and I know we're talking a lot about academia. If there was one thing I would have been done differently about going into a PhD, I would have been less timid and shy about the funding issue. And you can ask these kind of questions, and that's part of doing your homework, is comparing what is this offer. And in my opinion, if you're looking into a PhD program, you look for funding and clarify what that funding is. And then again, you can ask the grad students about the funding situation, but treat it in sort of a business sense, because it is an investment. And in my opinion, I mean, there are funded PhD programs out there, and look into those, right? And because like in my case, I actually accepted at the University of Kentucky, and my first semester was not funded. Veronica was fully funded, and we had a competing offer at South Florida. Full offer for both of us. And it's kind of funny, years later I told my PhD advisor, it actually worked out well, I got full funding after that, but I told my PhD advisor that, and she said, well, that was dumb. And we had a great working relationship, it was great, but she said, she has a good point, she's like, we gotta look into these kind of things like businesses. And so don't be super shy about it, because a lot of incoming students come in, and again, this doesn't mean be like pounding your fist on the table, but be professional about it. But these are the kind of questions that they're used to answering, right? They're out there, there are answers to this kind of stuff.
When you say funding, this might be a silly question, but something like to pay for you to go to school or for you to conduct your research?
No, not usually.
I mean, the really top programs will come with a bit of research seed money. When we talk about funding, we're generally talking about tuition waiver.
Oh, okay.
And in exchange for that, you usually teach breakout sections of large intro classes. And then just barely enough money where you can scrape by living in a cockroach apartment.
This is not living the rich and powerful life, but the basic idea here is you want to come out with the minimum debt load that you can.
Yeah.
And also really think about that, and think about, this is another thing that a lot of students, I was one of them, maybe really look into that. Like, how much am I willing to put into this? And then look into programs and really make that kind of a decision. But funding, yeah, it means they're covering tuition. In some cases that may be an out-of-state waiver, but you're usually going to TA or RA. Sometimes they'll be like graders. Usually it's teaching assistants.
It's usually, yeah, teaching assistant, so you help teach a class, you don't teach the class. And then, like at Oregon, I had funding when I got there, the tuition waiver, and I think for the year I would make $20,000, right? Which is just enough to pay for food and board, but I slept with a mattress on the floor. I couldn't afford a bed frame, things like that. You just live like you live now, and you can make it work, right?
Yeah, I think at Kentucky we've got 13.
Yeah.
So it's like top round of life. But,
yeah.
But the other side of it is getting that to it, making that kind of decision, getting help with that kind of funding area ends up being this huge cost if you have nothing, right?
Yeah.
Is it possible to go to grad school and have a part-time job?
If you're doing a terminal MA program, they're usually unfunded, and
Yeah.
most students do that. They have part-time or full-time jobs. If you're having to work a full-time or part-time job as a PhD student, and you're intending to go on an academic track, I would be worried about you finishing in a timely manner and you doing the things that you need to do to get an academic job. I just don't think there's enough time for it.
You're gonna get buried. Like a PhD program is a full-time plus job. I know a lot of folks in the non-academic world think that we're over there watching movies and stuff all the time. But you walk into a PhD program, if you think of your most difficult class that you've taken so far in terms of reading load, and maybe multiply it by like 5 or something, then you'll have 3 of those classes. It's an incredible amount of reading, and what it means is you get good at organization and how to read. That's what grad school is, and how to take in, because to end up with a 22-page CV with all that stuff that Dr. Braje has done, it means that you go through this process of learning how to navigate massive amounts of information and how to organize it and pull from that.
Right.
That's what grad school is.
And you're taking all those classes, then you have to do your own independent research project.
Busy.
And none of those readings overlap, right? I mean, that's how it is. Work at grad school and PhD program was some of the most challenging, difficult, long, miserable time in my life, but some of the happiest too. Like, I was so happy just doing that. I mean, if it's what you really want to do, you'll be miserably happy, right? I mean, really, like, you're working your ass off, but if it's what you really want to do,
it's sort of,
I loved it. I was upset when I had to go to a job. Honestly, when I had to leave Eugene, I was so happy as a grad student, and then having to go be a professor and do it yourself without this cohort around and an advisor and this group of intellectuals that you talk to every day. I mean, it's hard to leave that.
it can be a pretty. I actually got reminded. I'll admit, I was in the field and grad school was hard, and it's like a book a week for 3 classes for 2 years straight, and writing 30-page papers in 1 week. I mean, it's nuts.
Yeah.
But the anthropologist Keith Hart, I met him, and when I was doing field work in Baja, I would go through my moments, my cynical moments, and he would remind me. He said, just remember, it's not every time in your life that you get this chance to really dig into something. He said that's what you're doing. And he was like, we always would battle out. I'm a little bit on the pessimist side sometimes, and he's like this eternal optimist, right? And anytime I complain, I'm like, I'm getting older, Keith. He's like, you should try being 70, right? And this guy publishes like a madman. He flies all over around the world. I'll email him where are you at? He's in Durban, he's in France, he's in England. I mean, he's all over. Oh, I was in the US yesterday. I understand you just missed me. The guy's all over the place. But I really like how he said that. I think I was actually probably complaining about my dissertation, and he said, when else do you have time in life to really dive into something that deeply? He said it's a unique experience. So,
and you're not getting paid
hardships,
much when you're funded. You're getting paid to do this. I mean, it's amazing. Being a student, if you want to go to grad school and you don't like being a student, you got to rethink that. If you don't like going to your classes and learning stuff, then maybe grad school isn't for you, because I mean that's the deal. That's what it is.
It's intensified.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, for me it was fun, right? And you go to a job and then you have to go to faculty meetings next week. Listen to my faculty argue with each other, right? I mean, it's it takes away from the research that I want to do, or interact with students, or do these other things, right? I mean, so it's a great time. It's a difficult time. It's a great time to do.
So we just focused a lot on academia. Do some of you want to hear a little bit more about another aspect of the job idea part, or have we buried you guys with too much stuff?
Yeah. I'd say keep going.
Keep going.
Are you gonna throw up, or are you like, oh my god?
I feel like I'm doing for the future, man.
There's no
you're
doom.
not. I mean,
Well, eventually, but
Do you all feel doomed now?
No.
You shouldn't, because I mean, honestly, doing this stuff, like
Yeah, even-
most universities, like students are, like I get a lot, you know, I probably, to work with me, I probably get 20 applications, 3 of which I can let in on a good year, right? And I can quickly get rid of probably 10 to 15 of those, because they're not doing these things, right? So, I wouldn't feel doomed.
Like this, like even coming in, like even what we're doing right now, a lot of students don't, like
They
the
have
fact
no
that you guys
idea.
are doing this stuff, this is adding to it, and you're looking into how the process actually works, and either going to the non-academic or the academic route, the more you know, the better. It took me a while to really start looking into all this stuff, and to stop being so timid about it all, and just start asking questions.
I had 2 students apply to work with me this year who both wanted to do Viking stuff. Viking archaeology. I've never worked in the Viking world. I teach about it in 103 and, you know just barely enough to get by. They wanted to work on Viking. They had like grade point averages of like 3.5, 3.8 from great schools. I took their applications and I put it in the no consider pile. Like that, I mean, it's just it's a non-starter, right? Because they didn't come to this.
Yeah.
And like understand that you apply to a program to work with someone on what they're doing. And I cannot help those students do a project on Viking archaeology, right? There's no way I can help them.
And your statement of purpose is basically what makes your case. And the advice I always give is, I don't know if you say that people always need to be sort of pitching a project, but I usually advise, like, you want to be leaning towards you're pitching an idea that you want to work on and who you want to work with.
Yeah, I mean, I say I don't expect you to know what your topic is going to be, but I expect you to know that you want to work. If you want to work with me, that you want to work in coastal regions and you want to work maybe in California where I work, right? That's pretty good. I would say 90% of the applications, maybe 80%, don't get that far to actually like go to my website and figure out who I am. It pains me.
I would say,
You
and
know?
maybe the only possible would be in some cases where I have known some people who they work with somebody who has a different sort of geographic focus, but theoretically, or
Yeah.
the issue that they're looking at. So it'd be like the kind of work you do, but I'm working on the coast of X, and I want to kind of expand that argument that you've been doing and see if it connects.
Yeah,
Right.
Right. So I'm going to do historical ecology here. Right. All right. That overlaps with me significantly. Right.
That would be
So-
a case where, you might not be right. Like I know a few folks working under, like Scott Hudson at the University of Kentucky. He does archaeology in Yucatan. One of his students is working in Guatemala, but they have a sort of a similar approach, and that's why he was under Dr. Scott Hudson, right? So it's not, right?
Yeah, and I can almost guarantee you that student called up that faculty member, got an email that faculty member, and they had a phone conversation about these overlapping interests. And then the faculty member was like, okay, that makes sense
Yeah.
for you to come here.
Yeah.
That's how it happens.
And like faculty, me, Dr. Braje, like you can also, if you're looking into that sort of stuff, you can run questions by us,
Yeah, that was a question on that too. Like, you guys keep saying like to use the faculty and whatnot. Like, what happens when after you graduate? Like, what did
Stay
you
in touch with these people.
do? Like, do you just
You keep your relationships burning.
so can I still?
Even if he's in Kentucky.
Yeah,
Like, would I still like send you an email and say
Yes.
like if you're available to meet or something, if I'm like still in town or whatever, like you're still here?
Yes, or through, a
Same.
I have
lot.
students that won't ever go away. It's great. No, I have a
Well, that's what
student.
I'm worried about too. It's like, oh,
No,
hell,
it's great. I have a
like,
student that I just wrote a letter of recommendation for, who just finished her PhD at UCLA, that I had as an undergrad student when I taught at Humboldt State 5 years ago.
Wow.
So she was the first TA I ever had.
Wow.
So I mean, I had her when she was a senior, so it was 8 years ago. And she emails me every couple years, checks in, usually asks me for something. I'm happy to do it. For a
It's
letter of
also-
recommendation,
but it's
or
how it
some
works, though.
advice, but that's it.
Because
Yeah.
people did that for you, right?
Yeah.
And that's how it works.
Yeah.
So we're used to this sort of stuff. Like UC Santa Cruz, I'm still in touch with professors from there, right? All the way back to Palomar College, I just ran into one of my very first professors on Oceanside here, Steve Krauthamel, and I'm still in touch with him. You stay in touch with these people. That's really good. And this also works for, you go into the non-academic world, and a lot of professors have also kind of done some crossover work. They can give you advice with that too. So the last thing I would say would be, so there's the statement of purpose. It's all about tailoring. Do your homework. The other thing is, and this is advice that works for both. If you want some really good advice, again, Karen Kelsey, when I was writing all these cover letters, like 2 years ago, I was sending out a bunch of them. She has this really great post called "Why Your Cover Letter Sucks and What You Can Do About It," and it's really good. And the main sort of gist of it is, and she's read tons and tons. You've read tons of statements of purpose, but one of the main kind of critiques she has is that a lot of times people get in their cover letters, they get sort of sappy and they start talking about what they would do or what they want to do and all that. And she says, you want to talk about what you're going to do, and you're going to talk about how you're going to do that. And so in like teaching statements is another thing. But this is a similar kind of letter. She would say, rather than saying, teaching matters so much to me and it's my life's work, and you go on and on, she says, talk about what kind of teaching you do and how you do that in the classroom. This is sort of a specific one for teaching statements, but like in a job cover letter, the example would be like, when I was talking with Noah, one thing I could do is go on and talk about how I love the ocean, and I love seashells, and I love California, and I love Noah, and I love everything they do, and it would be such an exciting opportunity, and it would be amazing if they considered me. She says, okay, be confident, right? No begging and letters and stuff like that. You want to just be confident and straightforward. So you would say, like the example I brought up earlier. Noah, you guys are working on this community-based project that's trying to get a sense of how these different communities are understanding coastal resources. You talk about that project, you talk about what you've done and the skills that you've developed.